What I want to talk about is how we have kind of come to accept an unnecessary amount of complexity when it comes to the creation of our digital experiences, specifically around the implementation. So to kind of set the stage, in 2001, kind of middle of COVID, I had a client come to me and they said their digital experience just wasn't performing. They would go talk to their engineering department. The engineering department said it was great. It was the best thing they ever did. But the numbers told a completely different story. They were losing sales. Customers were leaving and not coming back. The experience was slow. It was a bad entrance for new customers that came to it. Worse, the marketing team was just unable to use any of the marketing technology products that they had invested in already and been promised could do these great things like personalization and everything else. So the ask was pretty simple. Could we make it work? Well, we decided to lock ourselves in a conference room. This is an actual picture of the conference room. That is David Hasselhoff. Engineers are weird. We used to play a game. If you left your computer unlocked, we'd change your wallpaper to David Hasselhoff. One person got so tired of doing it, he just left it. He didn't care. So we locked ourselves in this conference room to really think about, like, how can we solve this problem? We knew the solution that they had right now didn't work, so at least we had a starting point. But then they came in with another ask, and that was, could they personalize everywhere? They wanted unlimited abilities to personalize the experience to however they saw. From a hero image at the very top to the micro level of being able to personalize the text on a button during a specific flow. So this made us really think about how we were going to deliver this, because this was an ask that we had kind of had, but it was kind of always like a philosophical ask. Like, sure, that's possible, but now we were being asked to actually do it, which made we had to reevaluate completely how we were doing things. And this led to kind of my aha moment, that what we had got to at that point was we were fighting against the platforms and we were fighting against how we were doing everything. And worse, there was just a basic misalignment between the two departments that are typically challenged with delivering experiences. And that is marketing and engineering. Each of these departments wants different things, and everything that's on here is largely reasonable. You know, developers and engineers want to work on exciting stuff. Marketing want to use the tools that they've invested in. They want to be able to do what the salespeople of those tools say they can do. Engineering want to go with it. But what happens is this kind of creates a little bit of tension between these two environments, because some of these two things are polar opposites of each other. So to really deliver personalized experiences, sometimes you've got to get down and use the platform. You can't just do what you want to do. And we had gotten to a point in the late 20-teens where technology was changing so fast and we had such new things coming and such new frameworks coming and such new tools that all of us were so excited to use it, but we were forgetting the idea of what that was going to cost the marketing department to actually be able to deliver the goals that they had. So this is my kind of question that we came up with. Who owns the experience? So when I first started doing this, it was marketing. They completely owned the experience. IT was kind of at arm's length. And then we started needing servers and databases and all these other things. And then IT kind of morphed into engineering, and they came in and said, we need more, we're going to take more control over this. But ultimately, everybody owns the experience. Everyone has got to be rowing in the same direction. You've got to have a North Star that you are going towards to try to deliver the experience. So, another example from before the one we had. Car company, mid-sized luxury company, late 20-teens. At this point, this was before, kind of automated or, reserving cars online, or really what, Tesla pioneered, where they were, trying to even almost sell cars online. If you talk to the marketing department of this auto manufacturer, their goal was to simply drive customers into dealers. Let customers find out where the cars were, get them in the dealers, create leads for the dealers, lead to car sales, go from there. That's what the main goal of their experience was. Build the car, let the users go through the custom building of a car, but get them into it. Engineering, again, in late teens, they decided they were going to come up with a completely brand new way of they wanted to do it. They wanted to use this cutting edge tech. They wanted to mimic the big technical companies in Silicon Valley. Well, what ended up happening is they created an experience that was hard to update and didn't achieve the actual goals. In marketing, what happens every year with car manufacturers is generally in the summer, they have what's called the model year changeover. I think everyone's kind of aware of this concept. It's when the new cars come out. And it's basically, we just need to replace pictures. We need to put the new pictures and specs of the cars up. This process, because of how this experience had been implemented, went from a few days of what it should be of just replacing pictures and replacing some specs to weeks of content updates, which then led to every other goal of the marketing department getting pushed back because these updates were taking so long. And the experience just continued to degrade and degrade and degrade. So it got to the point where like, we have to fix it somehow. This is something we'll talk about here in a minute, but I want to talk about this. So this is a scary thing. This is called a dependency map. This is basically a bunch of smaller pieces that makes up a big new, cutting edge piece of technology that we like to call. Each one of those lines represents another package that has to be pulled in to make the bigger thing work. This is what I will call complexity in a second. And it also relies on, in the beauty of open source software, people to maintain these things in their free time. And that you hope that nothing is going to cause a problem. Which leads me to this. This is one of my favorite cartoons of all time. Also, I have a very good friend that lives in Nebraska and is charged with the infrastructure of a major company, and every time the site goes down, I send him this to ask if it was him or not. No. This is not to say that there's not already an amount of complexity that we already just blindly accept when it comes to delivering these digital experiences. Nothing like 9 a.m., let's get an architectural diagram up on screens, but here we go. This is a simplified version of an architecture diagram it takes to just deliver a digital web experience. Simplified, but this is what it is. We just take this for granted. Every time we pull out our phone or our computer, it goes through all of this stuff just to make it work. And if we zoom in on just this part, which is just the thing that we actually see, this is what a typical MarTech architecture inside of that one piece could look like. So there's already all of this complexity we're already dealing with that we just kind of take for granted. But this was kind of the definition I put together. And I emphasize entangled here, because entangled, if we go back to that dependency map, you saw lines going all over the place. The two architectural diagrams we just showed, everything's kind of flowing in a given direction. But when we get to this intertangled piece, and there's, how we're building these experiences, things are getting so intertangled that this is where the complexity comes from. They can be hard to update. They'd be hard to do new features on. They go from there. Now, one important thing I want to say is complexity does not equal scale. And since there's only 3 developers in the room, this joke didn't land. But that's how you say, that's one way in computers that we tell things that don't equal each other. That means do not in computer language, or one way to say do not. So let's talk about Wikipedia. Wikipedia, massive, massive site. Millions of pages, multiple languages. I'm sure we've all used it. I used it this morning just to happen to look something up. But the information that they're showing in there is largely just text with links off to other pages. There's no complexity to it. It loads fast, it's easy to update, and pages hardly ever change. Now, if we juxtapose that with the booking of an airline ticket, in 5 or 6 steps that you need to prove who you are, take payment, possibly pick a seat. Say if you're going to check a bag, travel international, enter in your passport details. There's more complexity and logic that goes into those 5 steps than the totality of delivering an experience the size of Wikipedia, which is millions of pages. So where we've gotten to the point is we're trying to solve for that worst case scenario and forgetting about the simple pieces of it. So why do we do this? Well, we want to look like the smartest person in the room, honestly. We as humans, to our biases, we kind of disregard the simple solutions. We think they're not really quite thought out. We think they're maybe a little bit too naive. We always think the complex and the overthought, or the complex solution has been much more solutioned out and thought over, and we assume it's better. Not surprisingly, this is just called complexity bias. So it's just another bias that we have that we need to be aware of. Just because we hear of complex solutions doesn't necessarily mean that's the best way to go. So, is there a way? Well, it depends. It depends on what the goals of your experience are. Like all of us here, we have different goals for our experiences and what we're trying to deliver. Some it's airline tickets. Some it's purely informational. Some it's, trying to get new law or trying to win new legal clients. Like we all have different goals. Like we have to have an understanding of what those goals are. Do we want to personalize? What kind of information are we delivering? What kind of features are we delivering to our users? And most importantly, is everyone aware of what those goals are? If I go ask the engineering department, are they going to say, yes, we know what marketing's goals are? If we go ask the marketing department, is marketing going to say, yes, we know what the engineering goals are? What ends up happening, though, when we're out of alignment on this, is that we have started to solution things before we've actually defined out what the problem is. And this is something that if I could change anything in technology, this would be what I would want to do. Is we never actually start with a problem statement. We typically start with a solution and then work backwards to the problem. And it's kind of backwards. And it leads us to a point where we get to this solution. So what we do is, because of our complexity bias, we end up favoring overly complex solutions instead of using simple products or services that we may already be paying for, because we think it's too simple to use that, or that's just not something we'd want to do. Then we end up over-relying on technology. So once we start getting into a certain spot, we're just like, we're going to keep using this thing over and over again. It worked for the one place over here, so we're going to use it over here. We're just going to use it everywhere over and over and over again. And to go back to Jessica's talk yesterday, what ends up happening is we forget the fundamentals of the web. Like we end up forgetting the fundamentals. And we can become over-reliant on that. There's another thing that I like to call blog post architecture. This is where we get a lot of developers. This is very much an engineering problem, so I'm sorry for the non-engineers in the room. So what I like to say this happens is we get a lot of engineers, a lot of technical leads, a lot of architects. We've all been guilty of it at some point. We go read what Netflix is doing. We're like, this is fantastic. How could that work on Wikipedia? And it is just not the same problem. And then we get back to lack of internal skill sets. This kind of goes back to number 2. As we become more reliant on a specific set of tools, we start to really lose and dull those fundamentals that are still out there. And we forget about the fundamental ways of doing things to keep it simple. And we start at a more complex spot that we need to be. What I like to call this is we start optimizing for an anticipated problem. So to go back to my airline booking example, we know that's coming. If we are doing a project and we know that at some point we're going to have to sell airline tickets or cell phones or amusement park tickets, we know that's coming. But what we do is we start planning for that problem before we actually get to that problem. And what that does is it leads to the misuse of tools lower in the process on those simpler pages and the simple parts of the experience that just don't need it. We're over-tooling for the very complex parts, So this kind of leads to a psychological razor that I love, where we end up trying to basically hammer screws into metal, because the only tool we have is a hammer and everything looks like a nail to us. So the real question is, this can't cost that much, can it? Like if we're doing these custom solutions and we're doing it, what's it cost? It can't be that much. So this is the example of the first company that I started this story with, that their experience was bad and their sales numbers were lagging. So they had calculated the amount of revenue lost in page load time for every time above 10 seconds. So really think to yourself, how dedicated to a brand are you to wait for an experience to load for more than 10 seconds? What they calculated? $500,000. Over a month, when they asked us to come to it, their average paid load time was 42 seconds. That's $16 million a month. After 3 months of this, that's when they kind of said, all right, we can't do this anymore, and they called us for outside of opinion. Back to that automotive example, where they built a completely custom thing on top of what they were already paying for licensing fees. And I think we all know MarTech licensing fees are pricey. But in addition to what those fees they're already paying for, extra infrastructure costs they had just to host that complete solution, $8 million for the amount of traffic they were having. Just a quick question, could anybody else use $8 million back in their budget really quickly this year? And this is this is a hidden cost. But okay, now you've created this completely custom solution. You've turned yourself into a software development company. Are you a software development company? You know what it takes to actually do software development? It's very tricky. But now, because we had developed a custom solution, there was now a team of 12 resources dedicated to just maintain and make sure nothing happened with that solution. I think we can all do the math quick in our head, whatever 12 times the annual source is, but this is just a hidden cost that you don't think of. The bigger cost, in my opinion, is these people get taken out of the resource pool for new projects that come on and try to do it. So now you're almost paying twice, because now you have to replace the resources, but you don't have these resources, but you're still paying their salaries. You got to do it to stay up. You got to do it. So can we find a balance? And first, let's talk about where does the complexity end up happening. We've talked about it a little bit to this point, but it happens in words. This goes back to Jen's conversation, or Jen's talk yesterday. Words mean different based on the context. Just to completely step away from the whole point of this talk, last Friday, a week ago today, I got a text from my wife. It's Mother's Day weekend. My whole goal was to give her everything she asked for Mother's Day weekend. She texted me, "Can you put a rose in the freezer?" And I said, I don't have a rose. She doesn't like rose. What do I do? I actually didn't have a car because I was getting her car detailed because that was the only thing she asked for Mother's Day, so she had my car. I'm like, do I have to Uber a rose? So I responded with typical husband, what? Her response, wine. So I easily went over and picked up a rosé and threw it in the freezer so it was cold when she got home. But the point of the story is, everyone hears these words. We hear them in different contexts depending on what the conversation is. Modern can mean different to marketing than what it means to engineering. Even the term like headless can mean different between the two of them, where you're trying to deliver headless content to your omni-channels, but engineering may hear it as that's the way they have to build the project. So it hides in words. It also hides in this concept of like what we end up doing with digital experiences, or what has been the experience of my career, is like we just get in this perpetual cycle of we're just redoing it, we're replatforming, we're doing it over and over again. I hear so many times that, well, X platform's not working for us, we need to change it up. This isn't working for us, and we never look at what the implementation is. We always blame the platform. And when we do that, we get in this cycle where we have to move, we have to continually move people to that new platform. The trouble with this is, we also, to go back to the Sonos example from yesterday too, you never want to leave features off for your users. If your primary business is selling plane tickets or selling cell phones, you've got to make sure that that feature stays there to sell those things when you're doing these replatformings. And timelines are always tight. We're always working on deadlines. We end up just pulling forward so much of the old experience that we never take the time to think about, is that the problem? Should we start there? Should we maybe, instead of replatforming, take a more iterative approach and let's find out what improvements we can make? This leads me to another psychological razor that we get into this replatform cycle, is just when you're designing a complex system from scratch, it will never work. And we're just going to start the cycle right over again. And we're going to be right back to it. So, again, start to look what the actual problem is and not just the platform. Another thing we hear quite a bit is our business is just too unique for these out of the box or off the shelf solutions. Basically the products that MarTech salespeople are trying to sell to you very well. Well, I want to say with One North, we kind of have a unique perspective. And this is oversimplified, but I think we could probably all agree these are 5 pretty good goals that all of us in this room are trying to do with digital experiences. What makes us different is what differentiates us from our competitors, which leads me to a new thing I want to introduce, the 20/80 rule. Meaning, focus on the 20% that makes your company different from your competitors and put your time and effort into there. And if you're not a software development company, maybe don't get into software development practices. And focus on the products that you already have people calling you to use and you may already be paying for. It's always still shocking to me when we get in with these Fortune 500 or Fortune 50 companies and they have all these products available to them. It's because all these different departments have bought them and we just need to piece them together. So this leads me to another story. When we were at Adobe Summit a couple months ago, James Quincy, the CEO of Coca-Cola, was on stage. He was one of the special guests that Adobe had. He was talking about the challenges they face in their distribution model, where how they have to get their products to every part of the globe, everywhere as quickly as they can. Before he took over, they were trying to do about 60% of that work, and they just couldn't do it. So what they started to do is what they realized, as he quoted, we were great at beverages, but terrible at bottling. So one of the things he decided to do was to start to take that bottling and move that distribution stage to the people that knew the products and knew the areas they needed to get distributed better than Coca-Cola did. Think not the United States, but smaller countries that they just had to get the infrastructure into. So this is what I would challenge everyone in the room to start focusing on. Focus on what makes you different from your competitors, because that's where the experience is going to shine. So, wrapping up. Know what you're good at, know what you're great at, know what you're not. Goes back to the Coca-Cola story. Please focus on the thing that sets you out from your competitors. So many great brands in the room, so many great experiences, both in person, online. Focus on that. Use the tools you have available. This is where it starts to get, make sure your engineering teams know that if you've already invested in a tool, that it's available to be used. Lead with the problem, not the solution. This is, be sure when you write down and you're talking across departments, both departments understand what the problem that we're trying to solve is and not just accept what the solution is. Especially if you're in marketing and the engineering comes in and says, yeah, we already know how we're going to build this. Challenge them, ask why, ask what it's going to solve. And start simple. Like we all know that eventually we're going to get to the complexity. There's no reason to add more tools and more complexity ahead of time or before it's needed because it's just going to lead to misuse. And this is the hardest one, admittedly, is getting alignment across departments. But if multiple departments understand what the overall goal is, it's much easier to set the course to the North Star of what your company is trying to deliver, rather than 2 departments working independently trying to assume what that is. These also align very closely back to how Ryan started us yesterday and the 4 principles from the McKinsey work. It's like, this is not hard. It's not rocket science. It's just starting simple. So to wrap it up, did we deliver personalization ever? We did. It basically made us rethink everything that we had done up to that point. We had to rethink the fundamentals. We had to go back to the basics. We actually went back to when I started writing. We started doing things the way I was doing it when I was writing experiences in 1999. Like we had to start that basic and then slowly build a foundation up that allowed for all the complexity to be on top of it. Foundation should be boring. Add complexity as you get higher. And it was very simple. It was fundamentals over tooling. It was patterns over frameworks. And lastly, we just kept it simple, stupid. One last thing. So I've been up here talking for 25 minutes now. I haven't said AI once. AI is just a tool. It's just like anything else I just said. If you overuse the tool, it will lead to its overuse and it will add to complexity that comes into it. And it still needs some sort of human intervention to make sure that it's not doing something it shouldn't be doing and make sure that it makes sense for working with your brands. So Last thing I want to leave you with is this quote from Albert Einstein, and the plea to not be scared of the symbol. Thank you very much.